Hey there, early risers, go-getters, all-nighters, and in-betweeners. Today is a new day. It's time to move and reclaim your routine. And if pain is holding you back, The Joint Chiropractic can help with our $29 new patient special, including consultation, exam, and adjustment. Visit thejoint.com today and reclaim your routine. The Joint Chiropractic. You're back, baby.
What's the difference between good and great? Good treats you like a customer. Great treats you like a friend. From saving your haircut details and clip notes to saving you time with online check-in, Great Clips makes your life easier, just like a great friend should. Great Clips. It's gonna be great. What's the difference between good and great? Good tries to get it right every time. Great actually does. With clip notes, we save your haircut details so you always get exactly the look you want. Great Clips. It's gonna be great.
Change is the driving force of success. Without change, there could be no success, no progress, no future, no need for leaders or leadership. Because success is a process, an assessment and response to change. Success is the stage upon which leaders emerge because leadership is success at scale. A relationship between leaders, followers, and stakeholders. A social contract to build a bridge from what's past to what's possible. Success is a story, a vision of a better tomorrow for individuals, careers, organizations, nations, and someday, worlds. The bigger the vision, the more dependent we are on the help and support of others. Individuals and organizational leaders face a binary choice: cling to the past or embrace change. At best, stubborn adherence to old ways and operational traditions leads to performance decline and a loss of relevance. At worst, failing to respond to environmental change will derail your career and threaten the very existence of your organization. Those that embrace the future, that learn to sense and rapidly respond to change, open the door to new ways of thinking, new ways of working, and new ways of engaging the human network ecosystems that fuel organizational performance. Accept or reject. With the power to punish and reward, change will not be ignored. For organizations and individuals, the change agenda is a big task, complicated by the fact that individuals can't pause their careers and organizations can't pause ongoing operations to conduct transformation activities. Flipping the paradigm from managing the past to leading the future is central to the effort. A simple perceptual shift with far-reaching implications, because without this shift, there can be no lasting, sustainable change, no effective strategy, no leaders, no leadership. That's why the help and support of others is essential to achieving career and organizational goals. What do you want to achieve in your career? What do you want to achieve for your organizations? Who are the people in your life? Who are the people in your organization? Who are the people willing to help you build your bridge? From the edge of tomorrow, where a growing legion of people are renegotiating the future before it's too late, this is Willing to Win. I'm Jeff Kaplan, and for over 30 years, I've traveled the globe, studying the world's best businesses and the people that run them. But something is very different now. From the boardroom to the break room, there is a growing realization that our relationship with work is broken. But it's not too late. You have a choice. Hold on to the past and struggle to survive, or join the willing, change, and thrive in the world of tomorrow that's already arrived. If you're willing to think different, willing to work different, willing to change at the speed of now, then you're willing to win. This is Willing to Win. I'm Jeff Kaplan.
And I'm Thomas-Gettman. Thanks for staying with us as a growing audience of who we like to call the Legion is rallying around our call to action to help you rewrite your future before it's too late. And that's where Jeff comes in. We've dubbed him the future guy to help us embrace the change that we know is coming, that we can't avoid, and many of us might have a tough time coping with. Your opening monologue, that we like to call From the Edge, really speaks to this through the lens of running an organization. Change is inevitable. We just went through massive shifts when it comes to the way we do our jobs, especially with the impact of the pandemic. And what you talk about that's so important is not leading from the past, but embracing your future. Talk a little bit more about how we do that, especially when we consider how remote and hybrid work are really here to stay.
Yeah, there's just so much discussion about remote work and whether, it was just for a while during COVID and now we're going to go back to the way things are. One thing that we've learned, or I've learned in studying the future for over 30 years, is we never ever go back, right? We may have, periods of time where we, go back a little bit so that it feels like the past for a little while, but that's more like a death rattle than it is a revitalization of the things that came before. I mean, I remember being in organizations that said, we're really considering adding technology to the organization, and we might put a computer on every desk. And people were saying, there's no need to have that amount of computing power, at the desk. Can you imagine if an organization, lived by those ideas today? And I think the same thing should be said about remote work. Remote work isn't new. There are a lot of industries and a lot of jobs that for years, decades, have worked remotely. People in the creative industries that make movies, people that do, things that aren't necessarily assembly line, have always had the option of working from anywhere. Now with technology, we can expand that, far greater than ever before. And if you think there's a real argument out there, let me just offer this one fact, right? This one estimate. It is estimated that the cost of housing workers each year comes in at about 16% of overall revenue. So if you were an organizational leader and you're able to free up 16 cents on every dollar, or maybe make the cost go from 16 cents on the dollar to 8 cents on the dollar by creating a hybrid option and maybe getting more out of the physical locations and offices that you have, of course you're going to do that. So there really isn't an argument. You can hear people go one side or another, or talk about, going back to the old ways, but just rest assured, it's not going to happen. The question is, where do you fit in? How do you want to craft your career? Remote or physically located?
And this came up recently, specific to Elon Musk's edict to all his employees that they needed to all collectively return to the office. What you're saying is, like you just described, it's not a one size fits all. In fact, you would advocate for being open-minded to that hybrid approach.
Yeah, and I think that the answers to all of our questions in the future, and I try to stay away from absolutes, but broadly speaking, most of the answers in the future will be long tail answers, meaning they won't be, answers that apply to everybody, but will be customized. They'll be contextualized. So maybe, if Elon Musk had, intended to contextualize his comments for an assembly line, well, yeah, you may actually need people on the assembly line to do assembly line work. That would be hard to argue with. But when you talk about all the different industries that are out there and all the different jobs that are out there that could be freed up by technological support and becoming remote, well, I got to think that a lot of people are going to take that option. My concern is that some CEOs won't see that advice and then apply it contextually and simply follow somebody who has a lot of zeros, after their name and their net worth column, and think that because he has those zeros that somehow he's right or righter than everybody else, when it's just not the case. We have to contextualize it. Each organization should have and should find its own customized solution.
Great insight from Jeff Kaplan, aka the Future Guy. Don't go anywhere. We're going to come back and talk more about tolerance for change. Is your organization really as tolerant as you think it is when it comes to all the change that's inevitable? Stay with us.
Willing to win.
Thanks for staying with Willing to Win. I'm Tara Thomas-Gettman.
I'm Jeff Kaplan.
We talk about change. That's something that for Jeff is really defining all of our futures. We know it's coming, but are we going to embrace it for good? Use it in a way that's constructive. And when it comes to organizations, it's interesting because we all like to think, especially if you're a leader, you're not going to admit otherwise, hey, I can roll with the tide, I can handle change. But what you found in your decades of research is that not every org has this high tolerance for change that they may claim to embrace.
That is a very safe comment. I think you're absolutely correct that nobody can really argue with that, right? Tolerance for change is not a strong suit for most organizations. But just let's take a step back. Let's take a step back from business and just go in general and think about just the logic of how this is built. If you are in a system or you are in a game and all of a sudden you get to the point where you're doing really, really well, it's to your advantage to keep the rules, to keep the game exactly the way that it has been. You will fight with every fiber of your being to keep what you have, right? That's how we play the game. But as the game's changes and the rules change, there will be people that are incented to not go with those changes, right? Not go with, and those are the organizations you need to avoid, because there are plenty of people at the top of an organizational pyramid that want to keep things exactly the way they are. So as you move forward and you start evaluating where you're going to spend your time, where you're going to focus your career, try to focus your career on organizations that understand that change is not something to fear, change is something to embrace, not only from a practical sense, but because change is where all the opportunity is, it's in the future, right? And we have to go out and get it.
Great advice. How do I know if I'm pursuing an opportunity with an organization that is poised to handle change and for me to benefit from it as an employee?
That is a great question. Just think about this. I mean, it may not be on your list of interview questions as a candidate to ask of the organization when you're in that interview process, but just go ahead and ask them a few things. If they can't answer these, then it'll probably tell you something about their tolerance to change. Number one, what's your strategy, right? And if they don't know that right off, if the person that is interviewing you doesn't know what the organization's strategy is, they're probably not really focused in on change. And even if they do know what the organization's strategy is, say, hey, how is the business unit, the operational unit that I will be in, what is that organizational unit doing to support the big change, the big strategy that the organization is trying to advance? So if they're not linking up what people do every day to the overall vision, the strategy for the organization to change, chances are they're not serious about it. But I also just want to caution you too that too much change or change for no reason at all isn't healthy either. So when we started to examine organizations and their tolerance to change, we started to realize that tolerance doesn't need to be absolute. It isn't anything goes, right? Instead, it's got to be contextualized. It's got to be customized. For example, if you work for a marketing firm, you might want the opportunity to be totally creative, to think outside the box, to do whatever comes to mind. That's great in a creative environment. But let's say you took that same attitude and you applied for a job with somebody who's got a defense contract, right? In one of those big buildings or those big, that make bombs and planes and defense materials and stuff like that. The kinds of places, and if you've ever been to one, these are like fortresses, right? There's different color lines on the ground, and depending on the color of your badge, you have to follow a certain color on the floor. You go to the wrong place, and some really big guys who spend their life in the gym come out and make sure that they adjust your body to the right direction. You wouldn't want there to be a free flow, all the change you want, innovation, all you want. Think outside the box. In an organization like that, they would want to keep it in the narrow confines that make sure that they're compliant with Department of Defense regulations or government contract regulations. In that regard, you just need to find out what that what the optimized solution would be for that particular environment. So the net is, find out if your organization is change-centric. Then find out if that change is focused in the right direction. And if it is, it's probably a pretty good indication that organization is going to remain competitive and that your career will benefit from an association with that organization.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. And it's not just about the organization, it's about you, right? How do you know if you are able to embrace change and use it for good? So coming up, we hope you stay with us. We're going to hear from an executive leadership coach, somebody who's really helping employees, people like us, find your purpose and your why to make sure that when you do find that organization that has that high tolerance, it's a good fit for you. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this.
Willing to win.
Thanks for staying with Willing to Win. I'm Tara Thomas-Gettman.
And I'm Jeff Kaplan.
We've been talking this episode about change and how it can set you up for success or really failure when it comes to organizations and also individuals. And that's where you come in as somebody who we like to call the future guide to really to coach us, if you will, about how change can be used in a way that's constructive. And you really can't avoid it, right? Because we know, especially in the last couple of years, it's inevitable, both personally and professionally in our lives.
You know, it's something that's overlooked, but think about it, right? If you want to get fit or lose weight, you have a diet plan, you have an exercise plan. If you want to get the most out of your dollars, your money, you have an investment plan, right? You go see an expert, right? But the biggest impact on what your career will end up being and what life you'll end up living is right out there in the future. So it makes sense to start to become an expert, become a future guy or a future gal yourself, and start to become an expert on what's coming next. Because what's coming next holds all the cards on what you'll be able to do and what will be kept from you, right? So that's a great piece of advice to start becoming your own expert.
We talk about our network and our sort of circle of influence, and we are fortunate that through our work with Cisco, we've been able to engage with Renee Patton. She is a leadership and development expert, somebody who's been helping so many people find their purpose, find their why, and whatever career path they choose, really ensure that you are plugged in to the right mission and vision from a company standpoint that aligns with your personal values.
Yeah, and part of having a plan is meeting an expert like Renee. She's amazing.
Let's hear from her.
When you look at change across industries, obviously education experiencing so much so fast in the last couple of years, but in general, from your perspective as an executive coach, as a leader yourself, how can we anticipate change when we're in charge of sort of fostering and steering both people and organizations into the future?
Everybody says change is the new normal. I think it's been that way for a long time. But again, I think we're seeing an acceleration of that. And I think a lot of times, certainly as a coach and as a developer of leaders, it's really being present with whatever environment we find ourselves immersed in, because that will give us clues for the future. So I think deeply understanding kind of where a person is coming from, where they think they might want to go, and then looking at the horizon. So trying to read the tea leaves to a certain extent to see, what are some of the mega trends out there? What's happening in technology? What's happening from a geopolitical perspective, which is more true today than any time before? What's happening in finance? What's happening in all these different industries? And what will the downstream impacts be? And how can we make sure that we're best prepared to take advantage of any of those and to really thrive within those environments?
You shared a piece, Roadmap for Change, that you have constructed that really has some tangible step-by-step ways that people can look at their journey and be more strategic about how they embrace and move forward with the change that, as you said, is coming, whether we accept it or not. What are some of the tips and tricks that you've shared that you can impart to the listeners?
The first part of this is really all around a values assessment. And I think so often we do end up going from one job to the next, one life experience to the next, one gathering or event to the next. And a lot of times we may not be thinking very purposefully about where we're going or why we're going there. I think being able to step back and really evaluate what you most value in life is the most important component of your roadmap for the future. And I think the ability to, sit, and in this article I wrote, it's all about sitting in silence for an hour or two and really trying to think deeply about what you value in life. When I left my teaching job and I stayed home with my two sons, I ended up getting divorced when they were 1 and 3. And I really knew that I had to be in a job where I was going to be making more money because education was just not going to help to close the gap. So I knew at that point in my life that nothing would be more important than my two children. And for me, that was a huge value call and it was a judgment call that I made back then to say, nothing else matters other than being able to take care of these two boys. And so that really shaped all of my decisions moving forward. So I was able to have a corporate career. I was able to make sure that I picked the right people as caregivers, the right educational programs, so that I could go to work and make enough money to take care of them. And without really kind of sitting down and journaling about this for an hour, I knew that that was going to be the foundation of everything that I did. So when I quit corporate America, sort of the traditional, 9 to however long job, and started my own consulting company, I was very clear about I needed to find consulting contracts that would enable me to take care of my children. So I think that's just an example of the first step, is to sit down and really figure out, what are the most important things to you in your life? Who are the most important people? What are the most important things that you want to be able to give back to your community? What are some of the life events over time that have helped you to define your values? And where do you feel most at home in your life? And so I think that whole idea of, who are you, and being able to journal toward those questions, I think that's really an important part of the exercise. So that's kind of step number one. Step number two goes into imagining the possible. I think a lot of times we're so focused on, the past, or we're worried about the future. We're not sitting in the present to say, what do I want more of in my life? If I could do anything with my family, with my career, with my self-expression, money, relationships, with my physical being, what would that be? How would I imagine the future? And so then I think it's an exercise of saying, what do I have today? How does that compare with my values and my imagined future? And if you're in alignment, great. But if you're not, then you need to step back and say, what are some of the things that I could do that would help me to be more in alignment with my values, with my imagined future? And then how do I really kind of, decide what changes I'd like to make? And I think that's the purpose-driven approach, Tara, that you mentioned from the beginning.
Well, this is all great insight, and I appreciate you sharing it and breaking it down in some easy ways that we can immediately do a check on where we are and where we hope to be going. Let's go back to your story. So here you were, in some ways, a single parent, and then being a woman and leaving one industry and going into a field that traditionally in leadership has been male dominated. So how did you navigate that, and what can you share to other women specifically to help them in their journeys?
It's a great question. I think about this all the time. And I think the most important thing for me was to be positive, optimistic, and brave, and to find mentors. And so the person who hired me into high tech from education happened to be a former history teacher. So he taught high school history. He was laid off as a result of Proposition 13, and he was a director in services at Siemens. So he was very successful. He'd been there for a number of years, and I met him. He decided to hire me, and I said, "Why in the world would you hire somebody who I have no idea what services really? I don't know what that means in technology." Marketing, I took a few classes in college. And program management. What's a program? So, I mean, I literally came in knowing very, very little about what I'd be doing in this job. And he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, I will teach you how to do this job. I said, "But what makes you think I can do it?" And he said, "Well, as an educator," he said, "certainly you know how to manage a classroom, so you could probably eventually manage people. You're probably a pretty good communicator because you had to stand up in front of a class, 5 classes a day for however many, years. You know how to manage deliverables and milestones. I'm pretty sure you can put together a strategy because you knew how to plan a lesson and, do all these components, and you knew how to set metrics." And so he really walked me through all the skill sets of education, and it made me realize, and then, by the way, not only was he a great leader and a manager, but he helped me through every step of the way to figure out, here's how you put a program together. This is how you manage it. This is how you develop and define a strategy. And so when I'm coaching and mentoring people, it's all about don't just talk about the jobs you've had, but talk about the skills you've acquired.
It's great to know that with somebody like Renee, we're getting that affirmation that if change is coming at you like a fire hose and you feel overwhelmed, there are sort of coping strategies that you can put around you almost as, a barrier or a shield so that you don't have to feel overwhelmed as change comes your way. And I think we see that so much in today's organizations. As you always talk about, they're going to be leaner and they're going to be smaller. And that sometimes means that your role is going to be much more visible in terms of where you fit into the company's mission.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you've got a fear of change, that's healthy, and you should stay, they always say stay frosty, right? Be aware of what's going on, but by the same token, just realize it's coming, right? And when you think about it, what's coming is going to be more human, right? A lot of people have a problem adjusting to the fact that so much of our life is on social media. People can see so much of what we do every day, and every mistake that's made in public is suddenly, on the internet, right? That's the negative. But the pro side of that is we're starting to see people as they are, and after a while, like everything else, it just sort of becomes the way things are, and people won't respond so much to the fact that, oh, that person made that decision, or that person tried that in their life, because we're going to become more tolerant. We're going to become more aware of it, and we're going to become more accepting, which means we'll show more of ourselves, and our organizations will be more human. And the thing about that is, if we embrace that, we can create a tomorrow that'll be a much better place to live in, and it'll be much more satisfying. That's why I think Renee is so amazing, because her advice helps us cope from where we're at today, which is literally responding. It is a future shock response right now to a tomorrow where we're much more comfortable with an environment of increasing and steady change.
So true. If you'd like to hear more, speaking of social media, we'd love for you to check out Dr. Jeff Kaplan, also dubbed the Future Guy, who has a lot of this great free insight that will inform you and help you live a better life, both personally and professionally. So go to TikTok, check out Dr. Jeff Kaplan, Instagram, or LinkedIn. A lot of content being pushed out every week, and we would love to hear from you. The Legion, thanks so much for joining Willing to Win.
Willing to Win is produced by Lift Productions. Guests on the program are not compensated, nor is their appearance representative of the Willing to Win views. Willing to Win does not necessarily endorse any people, products, or services.
Hey there, early risers, go-getters, all-nighters, and in-betweeners. Today is a new day. It's time to move and reclaim your routine. And if pain is holding you back, The Joint Chiropractic can help with our $29 new patient special, including consultation, exam, and adjustment. Visit thejoint.com today and reclaim your routine. The Joint Chiropractic. You're back, baby.
What's the difference between good and great? Good treats you like a customer. Great treats you like a friend. From saving your haircut details and clip notes to saving you time with online check-in, Great Clips makes your life easier, just like a great friend should. Great Clips, it's gonna be great. What's the difference between good and great? Good tries to get it right every time. Great actually does. With clip notes, we save your haircut details so you always get exactly the look you want. Great Clips, it's gonna be great.